Well, hello YouTube. We have ourselves a little bit of a unboxing video here. Well, of course, no, we're not unboxing the camper. We're not unboxing whatever's in that little box right there. Well, the other day we had ourselves a big sale at one of our retail locations. I went down and picked something up, and that's what we're unboxing. So we have ourselves here a mastercraft maximum table saw with stand. Of course, this is a replacement saw for a saw that I already have. I've had for probably 9 or so years now. However, of course, it was one of those scrap garbage picked saws that I picked out of the garbage years before and got years of cutting and use out of it. But of course, it was missing a lot of the added accessories that come with it. The only thing I really was able to grab was the fence. Everything else was basically gone. The wrench and the blade and all that stuff. So pretty much I've bit the bullet after all these years of using that one, which in the last couple of years has developed an electrical issue where it seems to turn off and on by itself. So that's not necessarily a good thing, especially if your fingers are in close proximity to the saw blade at the time, right? So we picked this guy up the other day when it was on sale. So that was pretty sweet, a little bit of a savings there. Let's drag her on out of the truck here and we'll start our unboxing. So pretty much, guys, I got the old box here up on edge here. I'm going to take the easy way out. I'm going to cut the bottom of the box out, layer on down, and then pull the cardboard up and off it. That way it saves us lifting virtually an 86-pound saw up and out of the box. However, I do imagine it's probably not attached to the stand. It's probably a two-piece deal. But hey, let's do it the hard way and see what happens. So of course, guys, here we go. We got our laying on down, pretty much flaps on open, ready to go. I'm going to cut the top open, of course. One, it allows some room for a handle. Two, it allows the air that we're going to pull with it to kind of escape. And then, away we go. So we'll pretty much work it off here. Pretty much discarding the cardboard to the side. So of course, exposing the saw itself. It's got, nice wonderful foam packing on both ends. Looks like there is a dado blade here, guard sitting right here, so that's kind of nice. Because, if you're going to plan on doing any amount of woodworking, you're going to need one of those eventually. We got our wonderful, manual or instruction book. So let's pull off all the foam here, see what we got. So in the first chunk of foam, we have ourselves the blade guard. And as well as over there on the far left, we have a couple of hardware packs with some bolts and stuff in there. And like I mentioned there earlier, the little dado plate adapter. Basically what that allows you to do is to put a dado blade in there without having, to modify your existing plate that's already on the saw. Pull off the second chunk of foam. I imagine there's stuff hiding there as well. So of course, right here we have ourselves what looks like to be the bar for the frame. That basically it's a stand that allows it to unfold. We got ourselves a little push-through stick to keep your fingers away from the blade, keep them at a safe distance, as well as the fence itself. Looks like there's a miter gauge in there and a couple other accessories. So pretty much all that you're left with once the foam chunks off are the saw and stand itself, wrapped in plastic. So of course, unwrapping the cardboard off of the stand, you can kind of get to see what the stand is all about. Have ourselves a nice, of course, painted gray steel construction. Couple of really good latches here. Looks like there's a safety catch as well as some nice rubber coated wheels. Okay guys, so here we go. Pretty much in the kit you will find, well, 8 of those bolts, complete with 2 washers per bolt and 2 nut per bolt as well. And in the kit you will find 4 black bolts like that. They have the, well, hex head as well as 3 washers per bolt and of course a nut on the end of them. And then you will find, of course, 3 Allen wrenches. One of them, of course, fitting the black bolts, and of course the smaller wrenches must be for another use or adjustment on the saw itself. So of course, to complete the assembly on this saw, so far one of the tools you will need is a Phillips screwdriver and a number 10 flat wrench to complete the installation so far. So of course the first piece we're going to put on is the bottom, well, frame support, which essentially is this gray, well, hoop here. Pretty much the gray hoop drops on into place. Pretty much, you know, pushing her on down to the hose line on up, and then we'll put the bolts in. Okay, so basically you put a bolt through the holes once they're all lined up. Of course, the head, and then of course the 1 washer. Put her on through. Of course, driving the other one in, of course, the same way as well. Put the flat washer on the back side with a nut, of course. Then pretty much we will give it a, well, tighten on down. Now this would be a little easier with a ratcheting wrench or a ratchet and a socket, or however you want to do it. I'm going to choose to do it this way because, well, it's the most tools I have readily at hand. So, you know, that's kind of the way she is. So, of course, the other end of the table saw, we have, well, the handle there with the rubber grip. That's essentially what you'll hang on to when you're wheeling the saw around or transporting it in the back of your truck or whatever's. So to keep from boring you with another 5 minutes of putting this end on, I will basically do it because it goes on the same way as, well, the first one. Okay, so now that you got the assembly all done, your stand should look somewhat like this. Of course, with the bottom piece there on, and then of course with the handle there on. Well, next comes the part of unpacking the, well, saw itself. So of course, guys, here on the finished side of the stand you will see a couple of warnings. The first warning is the stand may fold unexpectedly without weight of saw. Do not cut the bands or release the 2 locks until the stand is fully assembled and the saw is mounted. Of course, I will show you the bands or the zip ties underneath and the safety release. And of course, the second warning here basically says lock and unlock, stand set up in storage. Warning, do not stand or sit on or use this as a ladder. Make sure the paddle is locked before storing the saw. Injury may occur if the user does not follow proper procedures. Please refer to owner's manual. Now the maximum load of this here stand is 220 pounds or 100 kgs. Granted, you know, some of us don't weigh that much, but then of course, why take that chance? If they don't call for it, do not use it. I imagine when she's unfolded, she is fairly narrow, where most scaffolding or staging is fairly wide. Of course, unwrap the saw out of the plastic. In the bottom of the saw, you will find a chunk of foam wrapped around the motor. Virtually, that's just a shipping thing that basically just prevents the motor from rattling around and detaching during shipping. Of course, this is where the black bolts come in handy. This is how you fasten the saw down. You will need the large Allen key that comes with the saw, as well as a number 13 wrench or socket and ratchet. So of course, guys, let's take a look at the underside of the saw. Okay guys, so here we are, the underside of the stand. pretty much you see the green wire, that's basically the ground, runs to, well, of course, the metal table, runs to the switch box, which of course runs from your, well, wall plug, if you want to say, cord, and then of course runs to the motor. Now of course right here we probably have the most weakest point of the saw itself. You have two gears that basically control the raise and lower of the blade, as well as the, well, setting the angle of the blade too. So of course over on this side, unlike its predecessor, there is a cover over top of the blade that basically acts as a dust suppression system. You're meant to hook it up to like a vacuum or your own sawdust collector, and basically the sawdust falls into here, gets sucked out of the machine. Now of course, looking at these screws, it is removable either for cleaning or just to remove it altogether. However, if you do that, I'm going to assume, just like its predecessor, the blade would be fully exposed, and you don't want to be sticking anything in there. So pretty much the rest of the saw underneath is basically an open unit. You have an adjuster down here that adjusts the wing open and close, basically the threaded rod. Then over here you have a holder, of course, for your wrench to change the blade, as well as a space to put a couple of blades and hold a few accessories as well. So guys, that's pretty much the bottom side of this here saw. Let's flip her on down and mount her onto the stand. Okay guys, so here we go. Got the saw all mounted up onto the stand. Pretty much like I said there, using those black bolts like I showed you earlier, with the large Allen key top and the number 13 bottom nut. Pretty much putting all four into place, tightening them on down, and then now we're ready to, well, take it off the workbench, put her onto the ground, and then unfold her and see what we have. Okay guys, so here we go. Once the saw is bolted onto the stand and you got her on, well, solid flat ground, your work surface, whatever's, well, it's time to set it on up. So of course, first thing you do is see that black knob down there on the right hand side of the screen, and of course that well, gray handle there on the left hand side of the screen. Pretty much give the knob a pull and pull up on the handle. When you do that, the well, bottom set of legs are going to drop, and basically they're a keyed set of legs, so they require them to drop into like a little notch to hold it up into place. And then when you do that, basically half of the stand is now set up. So basically you pull on the black handle, releasing the keeper, pull up on the gray handle, and that's pretty much the only way I could get mine to catch. Now of course yours might be different, or yours might be the same. So we'll go work on the second side and we'll see how well that side sets up. So of course this side here has a black knob as well, and of course the foam handle that you hang on to. And then basically the same thing, the second set of legs drop on down and then she's set up. So you pull the knob, lift her on up, second set of legs drop, flip them on out, put her on down, and then she's assembled. Of course now we can get a look at the saw pretty much in all its glory. One thing I will say, compared to my old one here, it is lower, as well as it has a wider stance. Both, of course, in the stand department has a wider stance, and of course the tabletop is wider as well, so it's kind of a win-win on both sides, I suppose. Okay, so once you've got her all pretty much bolted to the stand, and the stand all set up and everything like that, well, it's time to, of course, put all the safety features onto the saw. A lot of us woodworking people don't use the safety features, and then when something goes wrong, well, it goes wrong real fast. So of course the first thing to do is take that piece of cardboard off of the adjustment dial. Basically toss that in your big discard pile. And pretty much there, that's your dial for raising the blade up and down. And of course that little lever there on the right hand side is, well, of course your miter, of course your angle guide there. Pretty much you flip that lever down and the whole carriage assembly, if you want to say, will slide to adjust your angle. To raise the blade again, you spin that handle. So now it's time to attach the safety features. So of course the first piece to go on is the anti-kickback pulls here. Essentially, we used to call it a shark fin, but basically what happens is when the plywood kicks back, these things here flip down, grip the plywood to keep it from like snapping back and you know, punching you in the ribs, right? So pretty much to install these on the table here, you flip this lever right here back towards you. This one here, you just spin her back towards you, and it unlocks a little dowel in here. You put that in this little notch right here. Basically, you flip that forward, and then she's locked in place. Of course, this is one of those things that I found very, very annoying on the old saw, and it got removed real fast. If it wasn't gouging your work when you were sliding the work on through, sometimes it would do as simple as just fall off, which is very annoying. Of course, the second thing here is the blade safety guard to prevent you from resting your arm on the spinning blade. Of course, the yellow button here, you'll find that on the end of the blade safety guard toward the back side of it. So first thing you want to do is fully raise the the guard here, so the yellow button is fully exposed. Pressing the yellow button, you're going to want to drop it into this notch right there. And then basically, there you go, she is all mounted on there. Now if you're cutting one side of the board, we are not doing a through cut like we'll say on two halves, you can lift one of these guards upwards to cut, of course, around it. You know, the work will come in, lift her on up, and then away you go, right? Keep on going. Of course, hit the anti-kickback pawls here, and then away you go. Same with the opposite side as well. So pretty much when you're wanting to cut something a little bit longer, need the support of the table, you have this nice yellow lever here. Give her a flip toward you, pretty much toward the on-off switch or the front of the saw. Up here you have a nice wonderful handle here to pull her on out, and then basically she fully extends. So of course once she's fully extended, you can cut your longer stuff. Don't recommend you put much heavier material on this far end because it can bow, bend, whatever's. These are just pretty thin little slides, but at the same time, this is kind of the saw for the do-it-yourself or the kind of home improvement guy, if you want to say. So of course, to retract the wing on in, virtually after you've pulled it on out, it's recommended to lock it in place, then that way she can't move. But to retract it on in, basically you flip that lever again, and then she pretty much slides right back into place. Of course, over time, your slides are bound to get a little bit gummed up with sawdust, build up, dust, whatever. Give them a flush out every once in a while with some non-corrosive cleaner. Then give them a good lube up with like lithium grease or something like that, and they will last a while. So of course, lock that wing back in to keep it from sliding down when you're moving your saw. So the next one over here to put on is the old rip guide or fence, whatever you want to call her. One thing I will say is this here fence is definitely an improvement over the older model. It's a lot more beefier, a lot more thicker. It has a nice comfort type of handle where the older model didn't. It had a narrower kind of a knob that over time I found actually cracked out that I had to re-glue. Pretty much it's a spring-loaded end there which basically catches and releases the table. If you ever need to do an adjustment, pretty much there's a little nut here you just turn and it adjusts. So you snap her onto the table, flip on down the lever, and away you go. She's fairly secure on there. You could probably pick the table up by it. To remove it, obviously, pick her on up, and snap her on off, and away you go. Okay, so the next thing to try out is your handy dandy miter gauge or a push through gauge as well. Pretty much it just slides in the front of the table here, pretty much just feeding in the notches that are in the table already. Basically like that. If you're cutting an angle, whether it's plus or minus 60 degrees from zero, this one here holds the work basically square, if you want to say, to the saw, and allows it to do its angle cut, and away you go. or if you're cutting, you know, a piece that you want to get run through that's a little bit on the narrower side, you don't want your, you know, fingers past this point on here, you can run it through, well, that way. However, it still is recommended to use the handy dandy push through stick because, well, that's what it's for and that's why it's there. Okay, so the next little feature it has is kind of a handy little feature, is right underneath there. You have the wrench storage area. You undo that little yellow nut there, the wrench drops on down. That's what you use for changing your blades rather than like a crescent wrench or a flat wrench. You use the wrench provided. As well as that area there is a nice rounded hollow out area, great for storing your, well, finishing blades, dado blades, whatever type of blades you're going to put in that storage that you're not using right at the moment. As well as there's a little tiny little pocket right about there that you basically store the anti-kickback fins or the, well, you know, anti-kickback pawls, whatever you want to call them, into there, just to keep them with your saw so they don't, well, you know, get lost or anything like that. So pretty much, you know, you just disconnect them from the table saw, just like reverse of what, well, we showed putting them on. You drop this on into there. Basically, you know, you can keep a carpenter pencil in there and a few things in there if you want to. And then the little handy dandy cover, of course, slides on over top. Pretty much just dropping on into the notches. And one of the neat things about this here saw is the fence pretty much just drops right in there and clips on into place. Pretty much like that. And over here on this side here, we have our neat little cutaway here that pretty much houses the push-through miter gauge here. Pretty much she slides on into the hole that's cut in the one side, pretty much through and through, and then in the other. So of course, back over here on the same side as we installed the well, fence onto, at the very, very bottom below the fence here, you see two little notches, basically right in front of, well, the pocket here where we have our little, well, anti-kickback pawls into. Well, this is where your stick pretty much snaps on into place. Great to keep it with the saw, I guess, while you're transporting, or just with the saw while you're cutting, you know, next to it, so you have her all good to go. One of the things I did not see in their instruction book was where to store the blade safety guard when you're in transport or so. Obviously, when you are using the tool, the guard should be on the saw, so you understand why, but there's no other thing in the instruction book to indicate where to put it. So of course, for those of us that are already familiar with power tools, most of the tools nowadays have that little type of switch right there. Basically, it's a safety switch. You pull out that little yellow plug and then nobody can turn this on. When you push in the yellow plug, then of course it's kind of safety's released and anybody can turn it on and off. But guys, this pretty much concludes an unboxing and an assembly and a first look at a Mastercraft Maximum table saw with stand, model number 055-6747-8. Of course, watch out for part 2 of this here video where we'll actually plug in the saw and basically see if it works. Run a couple pieces of wood through her, see how she cuts, and we'll go through a blade change or two just to show how it's done and all that good stuff. Pretty much as always, thanks for watching Maxwell's World. Comment, subscribe, and enjoy.